And welcome back, everyone. We are going today to discuss one of the important things that you need to know when creating pixel art, and that is the properties of value and contrast. Now, value, of course, is like our luminosity, how bright or how dark a certain pixel is in this case. So Photoshop allows us to do a lot of value manipulation using the brightness feature. All right, and by default, it sets it to 0. 0 means it's neither in the brighter or in the darker direction. So if I grab this scale here and move this up, you can see that it kind of washes everything out. That's because it's pretty much effectively adding a lot of white to an image. Whereas I scale it the other way, you can see that all my colors become darker. So it's adding a lot of darkness to the image. Now, if we look at this from the perspective of, let's say, contrast, what is contrast? Well, if we just scale this, you can see if I scale up, those colors kind of become richer, or if I scale it down, you can see that they become duller. So let's look at this in another way. If I were to, for example, let's grab our pencil tool, and let's just change this to black and white here for a second. Let's go ahead and paint a little bit of black in here, shall we? So this, of course, is black. And if I go ahead and make this into, let's say, a more of a gray, you can see the contrast between those. Now, where we will really see color contrast start to pop out, if I go back to my adjustments here, if I go and look at this and apply a black and white filter, all right, in our black and white filter, you can see where these colors start to contrast. Now, certain things, of course, stand out better. Remember, they had like red shoes, blue pants, green shirt. You can see, according to the grayscale features, how these pop out from one another. Now, on his face here, remember there was a little pink here for his cheek. We do not really see that, and that's because that pink does not have a very high contrast with that of his skin tone, which was kind of a pinkish skin tone. However, we can see clearly out things such as his pants from, for example, his shirt, because those are two different colors there, and so you get a lot more distinction between them. Same now here, his shoes, of course, are a little bit closer, but again, because they are not the same color, you do get some more distinction there. And while we're here, if I wanted to, let's say, for example, choose a lighter gray and paint that in here. Make it real light now. You can, of course, see how the contrast there can play a factor. Now, going from black to gray, you can see there's not as much contrast here. For example, going from the dark gray to the light gray. But going from the light gray to the black, there is a lot more contrast there that we're able to look into. Let's look at this now with an actual example. So let's go ahead and create a new image. I'm going to go ahead and choose to make this one 30 by 30 pixels. And of course, white background, no artboard. And let's go ahead and zoom that in. And what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to make a very simple ball. So to start out, you think, oh, it's a ball. Maybe I can use the elliptical marquee tool. And if you hold down shift, you of course will make a circle. All right. However, there's one thing that's going to happen. If we go and grab our fill bucket and we fill that in, you'll notice that our edges are not crisp. We do get kind of that fading gradient effect that happens with this. So what we actually are going to want to do is use our rectangular marquee tool. So I'm going to hold down shift again, and let's just go ahead and make a relatively large square. And let's fill that in. And notice here, we do not get any of that. And that's because with Photoshop, when you try to make a circle such as that, it does a best guess on the rounded edges and therefore creates those faded gradient effects that you had seen. We don't see that here with this. But before we do that, let's first go ahead and make a new layer so that way we don't have to worry about our selection actually creating any issues for us potentially down the road. And let's go ahead now and use our eraser tool to go ahead and make this a little bit more of a rounded shape. Of course, we still have a selection on, so we click off the selection. And now we can go ahead and start erasing out some of these corners here. to try and make this a little bit more rounded. Another thing we can do is, if we want, we can use that elliptical. Let's go ahead and just draw that over top here. And then what we can do is, with that selection in place, we can go ahead and hit select, inverse. Let's go ahead and grab our eraser tool. And one of the things that can happen now is I can erase, and I can erase outside of that circle. Now I gotta be careful, because you notice along the edges here, we do end up with some pixels that aren't quite what we desire. However, this will get us pretty close to having a circle, and then we can just come through with our pencil tool and brush this up. So I'm going to unselect the marquee selection here, switch back to my eraser, so that way I can go ahead and finish cleaning some of this up. And if it's not perfect, it's okay. Go to our brush tool to fill in some of those spots. Alright, and now we have ourselves a pretty rudimentary ball here that we can use. So, let's add a little bit more contrast to this. We want to, for example, have this look like it's not simply just a basic shape. So let's go ahead and use our color here and make this more of a gray, just something very simple. And I'm just going to go ahead and paint the top of this more of this gray tone, because I wanted to show just a little bit of contrast here, as if like a light is shining down from above on this ball. Doesn't have to be anything too crazy or beautiful. We're just showing a little bit of contrast right now. And I might even do just a little bit lighter, just to show, for example, like here's exactly where that point of light is coming down. Alright, so now I have that point of light there. The next thing I'm going to do is, maybe I want to do a little backlight down here. So remember, we made this ball very black. So maybe what I want to do instead is change that ball color, because I want to maybe show some shadowing. So I'm going to go ahead and, instead of making this black, I'll make this just like a very dark gray now. And let's go ahead and change this to being a pretty dark black here. Grab our pencil tool. It's not exactly black, but we're just going to go ahead and kind of fill this back line in here a little bit, just to kind of give it just a little bit of shadow to it. And speaking of shadows, let's go ahead and actually add a shadow behind that ball. And the way we can do this, let's just go ahead and grab black, make sure that's all the way down. And we're just going to go ahead and draw some lines out, and maybe add another line behind it, just to get like a three-dimensional sort of effect. So there's my ball. And of course, one thing I want to do is, if I zoom this out, so I use Control minus, alright, you can see as we zoom out, that will kind of change a little bit, but we might lose some of our definition around the edge of our shape. So in order to prevent that definition from being lost, one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to use the brush tool, make sure I'm on black, and I'm going to actually just fill in along the edges of this ball with the color black. Now, one thing you'll note is that as I'm doing this, I'm only filling in the edges that end in a point. So for example, these corner pieces here do not get filled in, because you do that, it's going to actually distort your shape. So we are going to avoid doing that. And now if I zoom out, you can see that that shape holds very distinctly. Now we do have a small, looks like, imperfection right here. That's easy enough to fix. If we just zoom in, we can grab our eraser tool and erase that pixel. And now we have ourselves a ball. And that's going to wrap that up, folks. Hopefully you can now see we are getting our first steps in applying things and the importance of having some value and contrast within your image.